The Winter Olympics are nearly upon us, and that usually entails unrivaled excitement in the urban world. But as exciting as the prospect of seeing our favorite Olympian on screen is for us, we bet it's tenfold for the actual Olympian. But with the excitement, it's obvious that caution also needs to be exercised. Some of the rules athletes absolutely need to follow for the Olympics can be a bit insane. Here's a list of some of the craziest rules athletes have to follow for the upcoming Winter Olympics. At number 11, figure skating rule 1. One of the most anticipated sports people look forward to watching every Olympic season is figure skating. The athleticism of this sport is unrivaled, with crowds of people tuning in to watch the skaters fluidly glide across the ice rink. The rule figure skaters have to watch out for this Olympic season, or any Olympic season really, is one that concerns a flip, the backflip to be specific. Landing a backflip is absolutely illegal in the competitive sport, and there are a few reasons for that. For one, the backflip is an extremely dangerous move, and when a figure skater lands on their feet on an average flip, they absorb 8 times their body weight. Another reason is that it's believed to be widely impossible to land a backflip on a single foot, which is how all flips and jumps must be performed on the rink. Not to mention, attempting to land one on a single foot is highly dangerous. It's not considered a real jump or a scoreable figure skating move. Fun fact, although the move is illegal and nearly impossible to perform, skater Surya Bonanali managed to land the backflip on a single foot back in the 1998 Nagano Olympics, but even so, her historical move wasn't counted or scored due to its established illegality. Now at number 10, short dance routines. Here's an interesting rule that only applies to the Winter Olympics this year. Since the figure dancing portion of the Olympics often includes full-fledged dance routines, the International Skating Union often chooses a genre of music for the figure skating short dance. In this particular season, the skaters must use music with a rumba rhythm, plus any number of the following Latin American dance rhythms: samba, mambo, merengue, salsa, bachata, and any closely related Latin American or Caribbean rhythms. As such, all the teams and solo performers competing must adhere to this rumba rule. It might result in very elaborate and fascinating routines as all teams try to come up with an engaging way to earn points. Next, number 9 is skeleton. We reckon this is an interesting one. So for those who are unfamiliar, skeleton is just an athlete riding a sled headfirst down an icy hill. Sounds terrifying? That's because it is. The funny, pretty weird rule accompanying this particular Olympic sport is that the athlete sledding can get off their sled to push it or move it, provided they've crossed the finish line on top of it. What's also interesting about this terrifying looking sport is how competitors run about 50 meters before even jumping on their sleds. All that to build up speed before hurling their entire body head first at up to 130 kilometers per hour down the icy slope. Next at number 8, no protesting. Now this may just be a self-explanatory rule, but that does not make it any less crazy. You could say that at the very least, the reason for this rule makes sense. So Olympians in any season of the Olympics are not allowed to express any form of protest on the field of play at all. So just be impossibly submissive. Not just in fields, the athletes are not allowed to protest in the village, during ceremonies, or even at the opening and closing ceremonies. This makes it virtually impossible for athletes competing to voice their objections at any point in the games. The reason behind it may be to stop possible riots and unnecessary dramatics, but the truth is that it takes away the very important right to free speech that all competitors should possess. The rule was put in place right before the 2020 competition and has since faced significant pushback. Number 7 is the basketball rule. There's an interesting one. The appeal of basketball and the most athletic interpretation of the sport is the strongest players can display. 6 feet tall players dangling off a tiny metal hoop is somehow a very satisfying visual that many cannot get enough of, especially if it is, as it always is, preceded by a satisfying dunking. But unfortunately enough, players aren't allowed to hang on the hoop after dunking. Now at number 6, fencers can't leave. Here's another crazy rule from the Olympics. This one admittedly does not seem that crazy at first glance. Why should a player be allowed to leave the field to play at all? Let us paint a picture. You're an athlete in the middle of the fight who wants to challenge or make an appeal. One would assume you could leave the field in a scenario like that, but even then, the athlete cannot leave the pitch or field to play. An example of this insane rule being upheld would be in 2012 when South Korea challenged a call. This was when fencer Shin Nam was forced to stay on the piste for nearly an hour before a decision could be made. Sitting at number 5, no politics. Another self-explanatory rule that when thought about reveals itself to be somewhat weird. Like most international competitions, the Winter Olympics too has a specific specific clause in their official rules to avoid involving politics in the games. Rule 50 of the charter prevents the games from being used as a platform for protests, demonstrations, or the promotion of political, religious, or racial propaganda. The reason that the Olympic Committee gave for the inclusion of this particular rule was not to stifle public opinion, but just for the Olympic Games to stay focused on the sports and not the politics surrounding it. This makes perfect sense on paper, and since it's a part of almost all international ceremonies, there really is no reason to deem it especially crazy. But we digress. Next at number 4, limited social media use. Imagine being at the Olympics and not being able to post every single thing you document of your experience as an athlete. Well, you don't have to imagine if you're a legit athlete competing at the games. The Olympic Games have rules for exactly how much of what you're able to post. The rules get really extensive and detailed. And these rules aren't just limited to athletes, but are also applicable to all forms of coaches and other officials as well. Content one post cannot intrude upon the privacy of others, interfere with the competitions or ceremonies, or violate security measures set by the committee. What athletes can or cannot post is very strictly controlled. For example, athletes cannot post images and videos that show the field of play or backstage areas, like athlete and coach only areas are all off limits. Now at number 3, speed skating requires 2 forms of timekeeping. Now this is understandably crazy, also kind of cool. So for the Olympics, it is absolutely required and extremely mandatory that both manual and automatic timekeeping systems are used for the speed skating competition. If you're wondering why that may be, you won't be the first. After all, automatic timekeeping means you're probably accurate to the closest nanosecond. Well, the reason this is used is to ensure that if these heavy-duty automatic systems somehow fail, times can still be determined using the manual system. Manual timekeeping method is just people using stopwatches manually. Now at number 2, stones can't be removed in the free guard zone in curling. Curling is a complicated enough sport without the involvement of any more rules. The basic goal of the game is to score points by sliding 8 curling stones down a sheet of ice with the aim of getting more of your stones closer to the target area than your opponent. Sounds fun in theory, but according to the Olympic rules, no stones from the free guard zone are allowed to be removed from play until the first 4 stones have come to a rest. The rule was first enacted in 1991 because without it, the teams would just knock each other's stones away, resulting in low-scoring games that were pretty boring to watch. Sitting at number 1, we have the figure skating dress code. Another figure skating rule, and it's just as bizarre as the other ones on this list. Who knew that dress codes were something that still strictly applied to Olympic sports? It's apparently the case for figure skaters who still adhere to a strict gender-specific dress code. Male figure skaters, to be specific, absolutely have to wear full-length trousers. That means no tights whilst dancing. For female athletes, the dress code's pretty strict in that it forces them to perform in skirts solely. These rules for the dress code were described as clothing that does not give the effect of excessive nudity inappropriate for the discipline. These rules are dictated by the ISU Special Regulations and Technical Rules Handbook. Apparently, these rules went into effect in 2018 after an Olympian's buttocks were exposed during competition. Olympians must now wear skirts, albeit short ones, to avoid this from happening. Too much nudity can result in a penalty. And that's all for today. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed watching the video, be sure to leave a like and comment down below. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to get notified every time we post a new video.